Good morning, everybody. I wanted to briefly go over some of the anatomy of your special senses. We've been doing so many labs, we haven't had much time to lecture. So let me go over some of these real quick. I think this will help you study for your test. So this is a cross-section of the nose. I know it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look right here, you'll see that this is the nasal cavity. So we're looking at the nose right now. Here's a couple structures you need to know. Well, this bone right here, you don't need to know it, but it's called the cribriform plate, and it separates the top of your nose from basically where your brain is. But reaching across that cribriform plate is this structure called the olfactory bulb. This is basically where all the neurons for your sense of smell comes from. So this is the olfactory bulb, and coming off of the olfactory bulb are these olfactory nerve fibers. So what's happening is these chemicals, molecules are rising up into your nose. They're attaching to these olfactory nerves, moving into the olfactory bulb, and then moving straight into the brain. So you'll need to know these two structures, the olfactory bulb and the olfactory nerve fibers, and as well as the nasal cavity. Not pictured in here would be your mouth, the oral cavity. So right below here is where your tongue would be. Your tongue has taste buds on it, but the little bumps on your tongue that you call taste buds are actually called papillae, and inside of those little bumps are the taste buds. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's move on to the eye. So we've talked about this briefly, but I just wanted to go over it again with y'all. So the outer white part of the eye is called the sclera. The white part of the eye is called the sclera. Inside the sclera is a structure called the choroid coat, which is this red color right here. This is the layer that contains all the blood vessels. So that's how all these structures are getting their blood supplies, through the choroid coat. And then on the very inside of the eye is the retina, which contains all the photoreceptors, rods and cones. Remember, rods see black and white, and cones see color. Okay. What you'll also have to do on your test is tell me the order that light passes through the eye in order for you to see something. So I'm going to trace that path for you. This is the front of the eye, so obviously light's going to come in this way and then hit the retina. That's going to be our ending point. But up here at the very front is called the cornea. It's transparent, but it's continuous with the sclera. So the sclera and the cornea are actually made of the same layer, but the cornea is just transparent. Okay, inside the cornea is a opening called the anterior cavity. It's filled with this fluid called the aqueous humor, and that just keeps the cornea from rubbing up against this structure right here, which is the iris. The iris right here and right here is the colored portion of your eye. So when you say, oh, I have green eyes, I have blue eyes, you're really talking about the color of your iris. If you see right here, the iris isn't connected all the way. There's an opening here. That's the pupil. That the pupil is a hole that light can go through. So it's going to come in through here. So up to this point, the light has gone through the cornea, the aqueous humor, the pupil. This structure right here is called the lens. Okay, it's going to change shape depending on what you're focusing on, but it's going to focus that light through this area is filled with a substance called vitreous humor, and eventually it's going to hit this retina on the back side, which is going to absorb all that light energy and send it to the brain through the optic nerve to the olfactory lobe, the occipital lobe in the back of your head, and that's where the image is actually formed. One structure that I haven't talked about is this area is called the ciliary body. It's a muscle that changes the shape of the lens. So if you're focusing on something really far away or something very close, the ciliary body has to change the shape of the lens so you can focus on what you want to. All right, last one. Let's talk about the ear. This is the outer portion of the ear, right, which you would get a um, pierced or whatever. This is called the auricle or the pinna. It's got two names, okay? Its job is to funnel sound into your head so that you can actually hear what's going on. This structure right here, we have it labeled as the ear canal, but I need you to know it as the external auditory meatus. Okay, it's basically just a tube that vibrations from sound energy is going to come through. Right down here, we have this structure labeled as the eardrum. You need to know it as the tympanic membrane. All right, tympanic membrane. Its job is that it's going to take those sound waves and amplify it through these three bones right here. All right, you have the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. If you can remember the abbreviation MIS, M-I-S, you'll be able to remember those in order. And these all three kind of have nicknames as well. The malleus is the hammer, the incus is the anvil, and then this they call the stapes the stirrup because you can kind of see that it kind of looks like a stirrup right there. Okay, this snail shell looking structure is called the cochlea, which is where all the actual hearing takes place. There's these tiny hairs in here, and depending on what the vibrations are doing to inside of the cochlea, kind of determines on if you're hearing a high pitch or a low pitch. This structure right here, there's three of these. They're called the semicircular canals. You can see that they're not complete circles. They're sort of circles, circular shape. These help with balance and equilibrium. Okay, so when you shake your head, there's a little bit of fluid inside of these, and they're gonna kind of move with your head when you're moving it, and it's gonna let you know kind of what your orientation is. All right. This is a long tube from your ear that connects to the oral cavity. It's called the eustachian tube or the auditory tube. Its job is that it equalizes pressure in between the outside of the ear and inside of the ear. So if you ever hear your ears pop, it's because of this right here. Okay, you also need to know that this is called the external ear all the way to the tympanic membrane. So what I'm outlining for you right now is called the external ear. Okay, the internal ear is going to be the tympanic membrane and the three ossicle bones. All of this that I'm circling right here is the inner ear. Okay, and then the cochlea and the semicircular canals are part of the inner ear. Okay, so I hope that helps you. Make sure you're looking over your study guide.